last night it was brought to my attention by me that Fascism Reclaimed, the subreddit Fascism Reclaimed, has been taken down. It's been removed. It's been banned by Reddit. Now, this has been a long time coming, but I think it's quite a triumph that it managed to last as long as it did, being that it's an openly fascist subreddit. And I want to talk a little bit about it because I actually thanked them in the description of my last fascism video. I thanked them for being a place, one of the very few places I could find, where a person could have a discussion about fascism in a non-judgmental way, in a non-antagonistic way, that would not devolve into just a right-wing circle jerk, that would not devolve into a bunch of paleocons lamenting about the state of the Jewish-controlled sort of hedonic state of the world, which is kind of where these sorts of politics tend to lead people. It was an interesting experiment to try to revive some idea of classical fascism that wasn't based on that kind of negativity. And that's what I really resonated with. Even though I don't necessarily agree with the politics of fascism, of classical fascism, per se. But I do think that a lot of the ideas of classical fascism, and of Mosleyite fascism in particular, are worth exploring and worth reintroducing with a new, contextual framework. And so that subreddit was seeming to offer an avenue into that. The only problem, of course, is that exactly the kind of people they were trying to get away from, exactly the kind of people they were trying to get rid of, were exactly the people they were attracting. It was an explicitly anti-Nazi subreddit. It was an explicitly anti-bigotry subreddit. But of course, if you know anything about fascism, you know that fascism embraces national prejudices. And it did so in the old days, and neo-fascists do the same thing. And in fact, neo-fascists might even do it more so, because I think there's less of a progressive element in neo-fascism. It's more about regression to the old days. Oh, remember the old regime? Remember Il Duce? Il Duce, fantastico! That's kind of what these guys, the neo-fascists, usually are doing. They're just remembering, oh, when my grandfather was a kid, yes, Italia was beautiful, bellissimo, and so that kind of attitude was shunned by the moderators of the subreddit. Not so much admiration of the old days, but just the prejudicial mindset, the regressive mindset. It was trying to kind of reclaim fascism. That was the idea. Fascism reclaimed, fascism reinvented. But it's a very nuanced message that's hard to really communicate. And yet the subreddit did very well. It had about 14.5 thousand subscribers, as far as I remember. And so that's quite good. And it had been around for quite a few years, which is pretty impressive given the subject matter. But the issue, of course, with the subreddit from the beginning was that it attracted anti-Semites, it attracted racists, it attracted paleocons, it attracted the kind of people who they were not trying to attract. And that's just kind of a fundamental issue with fascism and neo-fascism, and trying to kind of rally behind the banner of fascism, is that's the people you're inevitably going to attract. And so the subreddit kind of struggled to maintain its identity in the face of that. And under every thread, you would see several comments that would say comment removed by moderator. You would have several of those, and that was a good thing, because it showed that the moderators were they were on it, because they had to be on it in order to keep the subreddit up. They had to make sure that those kind of comments were removed, and that's probably why it lasted so long. But there was always an attempt to get rid of them. There's this awful subreddit called Against Hate Subs, I think, or Against Hate Subreddits. And it's just about basically policing what you're allowed to say. Only politically correct speech is allowed on Reddit. You aren't allowed to believe in anything that is contrary to the narrative that we're pushing, or else that's a hate subreddit, and we have the right to remove you. And they had been attacking Fascism Reclaimed for a long time, and it looks like they finally succeeded. If I were to guess, I would say that it was the initiative of those people who actually created the downfall of this subreddit. But even the lead moderator of Fascism Reclaimed was jaded to it at a certain point, and a few months ago he actually left the subreddit. He decided to no longer be a moderator of the subreddit, just because it was so difficult to control the conversation. Because he got interested in fascism because of its message of unity, and yet, you know, everyone who comes to that subreddit is looking for a message of division. And that is really the paradigm that I talked about at the end of my video, the kind of irony of an ideology about national unity that's also identitarian. And so it promotes unity and division at once. And so the divisiveness was what attracted a lot of people. But that's not what attracted him, and that's not what his vision for the subreddit was. And so he ended up leaving and then starting a new subreddit called National Unity. I don't think it ended up going anywhere, because, you know, it's not a very spicy name. It's not a very interesting name. It's interesting to try to reclaim fascism, but it's not very interesting or novel or exciting to try to create a brand new kind of nationalism that's not associated with fascism. And so, but at the same time, it would probably be easier in a situation like that to avoid the kind of nonsense that he was dealing with over on Fascism Reclaimed. So, yeah, it's just an interesting case. I feel bad that the subreddit was removed. I don't think that it deserved to be removed. Personally, I think very few subreddits deserve that. I think ideological subreddits shouldn't be removed. I think that, you know, if you have a subreddit that's actually harassing and doxing people and swatting people and doing actual legitimately illegal and unethical things, selling contraband materials, stuff like that, you can ban that stuff. I'm okay with that. But I'm a free speech believer. I know it's not really much of a nihilistic thing to be a believer in anything, but if I do believe in anything, and I must because I'm a human being, if I do believe in anything, it's free speech. And that's kind of a quasi-religious belief, in that it's not necessarily a logical deduction or induction. It's just something that I feel very deeply is important. And it matters very deeply to me on an emotional level. And I just think it's sad when we see that people aren't allowed to air out these opinions, because then that stifles conversation, and it makes it harder to even really get people out of those ideas if they're the wrong ideas. Like, for instance, there wasn't, back when, you remember Caleb Kane and the YouTube alt-right pipeline, how he, as a teenager, started watching Stéphane Molyneux, and then from there he started watching Jared Taylor and all of these white supremacists on YouTube, and he became a far-right paleocon alt-righter. And the thing that got him out of that, you know what it was? It wasn't having his subreddits taken down. That wasn't the thing that got him out of that. What got him out of it was Destiny. And Destiny was novel because, unlike all the other left-wing people who came before him on YouTube, he was actually directly engaging with the alt-right, having debates with the alt-right, looking at their ideas and telling them what he thought of their ideas. And so unless these ideas can air themselves out, unless these ideas can have the time of day to express themselves, they're not going to have the same scrutiny put on them. And so there's not going to be any reason for people to abandon them. That's how I see it. Now, there's also a different way of seeing it, which is that if you prevent the ideas from getting out in the first place, then they won't infect other people. But I don't like viewing ideology as a disease. That's the problem I have with the common interpretations of fascism. They treat it like it's a big mass delusion, mental disorder kind of deal. I don't like looking at ideology in that way. To me, ideas are ideas. And, I don't think it's anyone's fault that they happen to be persuaded by a particular idea. I think there are different reasons why people are persuaded. Not all of them are as laudable as others. But I don't ultimately think, I don't think it's something that we should treat like an epidemic. I think that we should instead treat it as a challenge. As a challenge to us to engage with ideas that make us uncomfortable, and also as a challenge to us to engage with them positively, in that we are giving them the space to infect us if they might, but also to engage with them negatively in that if they fail to infect us, then they were just simply the weaker idea, and beating that idea with a better idea. I think that's the only honest way to go about it. I don't think that preventing people from seeing ideas is the way to solve anything, ultimately, in the long run. And this is a long-run perspective. This is a long-term perspective. I'm not looking at things from the short-term angle. And I think that's a flaw in a lot of left-wing thinking, is that they think of everything very impatiently, without being able to see, well, what's the long-term consequences of conditioning a society to think this way? Like, for instance, with political violence. Left-wingers love political violence. They love hitting other people. They love hitting other people that they disagree with, whom they disagree with. And what are the long-term consequences of teaching a society that that's okay? They never think about that. They only think, well, deplatforming works. Well, yeah, it might work, but does that mean it's good? No. What are the long-term consequences of creating a society where discourse and true thought and intellectual speculation is just not valued, where the intellectual process is not valued? What are the ultimate consequences of that? You get a stupid, irrational population. You get a population that's erratic and immature and insensitive to other people. What are the consequences of not allowing people to be exposed to other people who make them uncomfortable? you get less exposure therapy and you get more prejudice. So that's how I see things. I look at things in a more kind of spiritual way in that way, I think. And so that's the reason I'm against banning hate subreddits, and I dislike the subreddit against hate subreddits. And I think Fascism Reclaimed was a one-of-a-kind thing that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. It provided a unique service that I thought was valuable, and so it's a shame to see it go.